So I'm delighted today to have Natasha Munasinghe with me on the podcast. And Natasha is a lawyer, a business director, and is now jumping headfirst into the world of technology by becoming a software developer. She sits on the Alumni Council for the University of Sydney, guiding alumni strategy for over 380,000 students globally. She graduated from the Uni of Sydney and the Australian National University, and then became interested in business and bought a training and education company, which is called Frank, which she's now the director of. And Frank has trained over 100,000 people and has a mission to prepare the present and emergent generations for the future. Enterprise clients include those in the tertiary, government and private sectors. She's pursuing her interest in technology and increasingly entrepreneurship, and she's completed study to be a full stack developer, winning the Women in Technology Scholarship. She's currently enrolled in Stanford University Innovation and Entrepreneurial certificates, and I look forward to welcoming Natasha to the program today.
Thanks, Annie. Thank you for having me. And as you can see, it is a fruit salad of an experience that is my life.
Well said. And I know you've lived all around the world as well. You've lived in the Asia and the Pacific areas, and now you're in Sydney, Australia. And so, yeah, you're a very fascinating, highly intelligent, go-getting kind of woman.
So I'm really nice way to put it. Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to, unpacking your journey. So we met just recently because you're at the university and you were starting to think of, you've been working for a couple of years on a book. Mm-hmm. And so tell me a little bit about that book and then why you're doing that at the moment. And then we'll unpack the journey that has led you to this time.
Okay, cool. So yes, the book is called Our Australian Dream. It's been a 2-year work, and I'm really excited for myself and my partner, my co-author, to kind of bring it into life in about a couple of months. And the whole idea behind the book, it tells a story of 4 international students, or former international students, coming from their home countries, so Afghanistan, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore, coming to Australia studying, and now 2 have gone back home. And the reason it kind of resonates for me is I was an international student when I came here a long while back now, and so was my brother. So one of the main things we wanted to do, that we want to tackle with the book, was there is a perception and narrative around what an international student is, and I personally feel it's a bit of a made into a bit of a commodity, whereas I wanted to show there's a human here, yes, and for us just to be able to relate to each other as humans. And I thought the best way to do that is to do it through story and hopefully show how brave a lot of these students have been. And something that came out, like the common thread, which we didn't even try to, we didn't start the project with that in mind, was when they came to Australia, one of the things that was transformative, all 4 of them, was just the kindness and the kindness of strangers that they experienced when they were here, and the difference that made to them, and it sort of impacted them. So I'm kind of excited to bring that out.
What were they expecting when they came to Australia as a student?
Well, some of them didn't know at all what to expect. A lot of them hadn't been here. In fact, probably all of them hadn't been here before. They knew a little bit about Australia in terms of what they read in the media and, online or newspapers or whatever. They didn't know how diverse it was. So a lot of them came in and went, wow, actually, I can find my own, food store here. I can go into the mall and I hear people speaking my language. Oh my goodness. So that was a real big tick. And also things like we might take for granted here. So things like rule of law, being able to express your opinion. Those things that we think is commonplace may not be commonplace in a lot of places. So those things were big takeaways for them. And just the generosity they experience. So people, for one student, for instance, he came here and didn't have any money, and there was someone in Melbourne that knew of his story and paid for his transport to college for 2 years, and to this day hasn't met that person. But they kept paying his transport. So that's what I mean in terms of kindness of strangers. Yeah.
And does that happen through the Alumni Network? Is that how those opportunities happen, to give back to students in need?
I think one of the opportunities is through alumni, and even with our university, that's something we're trying to cultivate, is to create that relationship between current students and alumni. With these particular stories, it's them going into places like a international student hub. Sometimes they were, sharing their story and it was written up by a journalist. For others, they joined some sort of organization where they could meet like-minded people, local and international, have a conversation, and from that conversation, someone was generous. So that's how these particular interactions happen. But I definitely think with alumni, that's a goal to reach. That's almost like low-hanging fruit for all of us, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And how did you make the decision to who to choose for your book? You've got 4 people, so you've obviously got 4 diverse stories, but considering the volume of students going through the university, it must have been hard to choose.
So these students were all different universities, different parts of Australia, and I'd known of them through my own networks. So friends of friends, for instance, and we had a chat to a lot of them, and these are the 4 that really, after I finished my conversation with them, their story still rung in my head. And that was something that I thought, okay, there's something here. There's some emotion that has been sparked. There's some curiosity in the story. And every time I spoke to them, I felt really grateful for my life, and I felt like I had stuff to do and get on with it, and I had to be, I was inspired. So I thought, if they're transferring that to me, then there must be something here that maybe we can put into a book that hopefully when we share with others, that same impact is gotten. So these are the ones that definitely stayed in mind for me.
Fantastic. And how have they found the experience?
I think they're a little surprised that someone's writing about them. And we asked them really, some of the stories are a little harrowing, and they've been really honest and authentic. That's something I definitely want to give them credit for, is they haven't held back in any of that storytelling and sharing. And one story in particular is very, very harrowing and very sad. So I just want to really, I guess, acknowledge them for that authenticity, because we need that for the book to kind of convey the emotion.
Yeah, absolutely. And we need to be real, because that's right. We sometimes have a distorted perspective that the international students are all cashed up from rich families who've sent them to Australia to have this, opportunity. And it's just not true. It isn't true in some parts, obviously, but there's obviously a whole
there
other
might be 0.001% that has the Porsche and the penthouse. Right? But there is a ton of people, and that's one of the reasons. Just from my own personal story, I can see, your family might have had to sell land. Your family might have had to sell their house to fund your education in Australia. Your family might have had to choose which child goes overseas out of the 3 children you have. So those are the decisions behind every student that have been made that, we may not know, right? And that was the whole point, is for us just, when I say human to human connection, it's just to show the other bits of the story before they get here, and the real amount of sacrifice the family has made. And really, it is in the Porsche and the penthouse for most of us.
Exactly. So where did this desire to tell stories come from in you?
Oh, that's it's a difficult question. I, again, don't think it was a conscious decision, Annie. It's just, again, what do I resonate with? What changes my behavior? What influences me? And it is when I can connect with someone emotionally, when I can see the humanity in them, that then inspires in me some set of actions or some set of thinking. So that's the reason I'm taking to sort of putting this book together with my co-author, is, if a story is what changes my mind, maybe that's something will change someone else's mind. And it's very important through story that we, show the humanity behind each of these students. So there might be other ways to do it, but for me, I found stories the best.
How is the experience different for students today than it was when you came to Australia?
I mean, I think things are heading in the right direction so I have to definitely give credit in terms of policy, in terms of attitudes. When I came, there wasn't any exception at all to an international student. We were really kind of left to our own, and we kind of had to really figure it out ourselves. Whereas here, there's a lot more attention, sometimes positive, sometimes negative, but at least you're realizing there is a different journey for the international student versus the domestic student. So even realizing there are two different journeys, for me, is a win, because it just wasn't there when I first came. This was a few years ago now. And also just in terms of the level of support, the fact that we're having this conversation, I just don't think that existed when I was there. We just came through, were able to blend in, did our education, and either went back or stayed. And there was nothing else on top of that. I think there wasn't any acknowledgement that it might be different, that we might be trying to learn in a second language or a third language, and acknowledging that's not probably the easiest thing. So if you're trying to learn in a second, writing a thesis in your third language,
exhausting.
Let's acknowledge that that's a little different. It's like if I went to another country, went to Italy, and I had to learn Italian and then do a thesis in Italian. Very different.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Oh no, it's so admirable to me. I'm just constantly stunned. I was a nursing teacher for many years, and a lot of my students had that same journey, that they're actually processing in their native language, and then transferring it, and then writing and doing an assignment and so forth. And oh my gosh, it's just so impressive that they're doing it. And then I also have met with many people over my journey who've had that experience of coming to Australia. And some of them, I remember even when I was doing my master's program, we're doing it so that their generations after them would have the opportunities in Australia, or for education, or in business. And so there was this honor that they had been, chosen, given the opportunity, which kind of links with what you were sharing before about, their parents may have chosen which child to send. Mm-hmm. And so there's great respect for what has been given to them, the opportunity, and the responsibility also as well to make the most of that, which is really wonderful.
There is sorry, Annie, there is a deep appreciation, and I think there's also a cultivation of that appreciation. That for me is opportunity for Australia, is, they are grateful for having this chance, and they also bring with them a bunch of skills and experiences that, in terms of this country, we can benefit from that. If we're thinking a very bit of a global mindset, we can actually have those peer-to-peer relationships. We can benefit from what trade looks like, because we have people from that country here. So that, I think there's still a lot we can explore in terms of tapping into that opportunity,
Fantastic. So tell me now, when you finished your qualifications in Australia for university, that then led you to become fascinated with entrepreneurship and software development. Tell me the journey there. What's been your path?
Yeah. So yes, I came here. I finished law. Then, much to the chagrin of my dad, I decided not to pursue law.
So disappointing.
I think I told him when on the phone, because he was overseas, and I could just hear this deep sigh going, "What are you doing?
How did I go so wrong?"
So wrong. This makes no sense to me, Natty. I think I always had, from a very young age, I had a fascination with business. God knows why. I don't know why. But I wanted to do my own thing. That was my sort of North Star from a very young age.
Yeah.
So I did try, in different areas, different types of experience. But when there's an opportunity to jump into and get into the world of business, I was in my 20s, and I just kind of did it. So I dove in, and I really learned about business by being in business. So I really have making all the mistakes. But also I think are learning quite quickly because of that. It's nothing theoretical here.
Yes. And also in your early 20s, you're not as protective, or you're not as embarrassed. No. It's kind of like just finding your way. It can be an advantage, because you're like, oh, well, too bad. I'll work out how it works. Whereas people at a later stage of life, often it's like, oh my gosh, it's going to be embarrassing. More people are watching me and all that sort of thing.
Oh, yes. You can cultivate that naivety. You can really use it,
Use your youth. Yes.
Use your youth. And I think one of the other things I've learned is I'm part of a group called Entrepreneurs Organization. I'm part of the Accelerator program, and they have speakers come through. And one of the speakers, who's a successful Malaysian entrepreneur, was saying, when you have about 20-30% certainty, you should go make the decision. You have enough certainty to go take some action. And I was like,
Yeah.
whoa, I was waiting for 80, 90%. That's the lawyer in me,
Yeah.
Whereas in business, you can make those types of decisions. Sometimes you have to with that level of certainty, whether it's a low level of certainty. So I'm glad I made the jump a little early on. It's through the education company, through sort of delivering the training. One of the things that was coming through that I kept hearing this word was technology, digital, because we work in the world of work in terms of our training and skills. And I got to a point after 2 years that if I was honest with myself, I had no idea what digital or technology meant. I would say it, but I was like, actually, what is this about, And that 2 years built into frustration. I'm just going to go find out.
Yeah.
And I really want to find out from ground up. So with that seeding thought, I jumped into this coding boot camp, this 9-month coding boot camp. And I did that whilst I was running the business. It was about 4:30 a.m. starts.
Yeah, classic.
And you come out of that as a software developer, and it was a crystallizing experience for me in terms of, yes, I understood technology, simple things like how does the internet work?
Yeah.
Forget all AI and stuff let's start with the ground up.
I'd like to know that myself.
You don't need to take a coding boot camp.
We just use it.
Yeah, exactly, right? But I also love that I realize how much power a individual with a laptop or a computer has. You can build something, it's up in the internet tomorrow, and you can reach 10,000 people, 100 people, 1 million people just by doing that. And that was really solidifying for me when I came through from that boot camp. And that really is the power of technology. That's the power of internet.
Yeah, exactly. So you've gone from doing law and going, yeah, I've kind of done it, but it's not my thing, to, oh my gosh, I love software development. So you sound like, you can tell the energy in your voice. You loved the boot camp. You loved the exploration of knowing that you're interested in something and then becoming a master in it, actually having that confidence, your level of confidence, that 80 to 100% of confidence, going, yes, I actually do know what I'm talking about now.
I think, I'm definitely not, and I wasn't during the course, the best coder at all. There was a lot of people in that class who were incredibly smart. I think what I came out, which was one of my outcomes, was I know what questions to ask now when it comes to coding and development. I know how to hire people who are good. I know what the bullshit test needs to be. Whereas before, I had no idea. I couldn't put a brief together. I couldn't read some specs. I didn't know how to put a website. Whereas I now kind of know the questions I can ask, and also where to go find some of those answers. That really has been very, very empowering for me, I have to say.
And so you've then gone and taken that further. What have you achieved? How did you sort of get to over 100,000 learners in your system? How did you build your business to a level and promote it and market it? How did you get your clients?
I mean, over time is a short answer, but also I think it's very important to do good work. So about 80 to 90% of our business is through referrals. And people sort of telling their, colleagues. And we work in the university space, the local government space, and these are small markets. So if you do a good job, people know about it, but also on the flip side, if you do a bad job, people know about it too. So
a lot more people know about it.
A lot more people know about it. So, definitely just really caring for your customer, caring for your client. I mean, as a business owner, and as you know, Annie, you don't have a boss in the traditional sense of the word. You don't have a manager and a supervisor, but your boss is the client. You have to make them happy. You have to understand what their needs are, but also you have to kind of do some of the heavy lifting so they don't need to do it. So their life is easier. That's kind of how I look at it. So that, I think that has really paid off. We're doing a lot more stuff with social media, but again, it's kind of the old-fashioned thing around just making sure your client is happy, communicating, and going above and beyond for them. Yeah.
So besides government and the universities, do you have any other corporate clients?
We work with corporate clients, and particularly the ones who have the graduate programs that are looking at their grads and going, you guys are going to be the future leaders. What type of skill sets of thinking do you need to have? What type of things do we need to embed? So a lot of the skills around, cognitive flexibility, entrepreneurial thinking, that's kind of the space we work in terms of skills development. And the thing I'm super interested in now in this world of COVID, we had a speaker over the past weekend, and he was saying everything you learned about leadership before COVID is null and void. And and I was like, really? And he's like, so, after COVID, what's this other world? Or is there a post-COVID world?
Yeah.
And so right now, just on a personal level, I'm sort of looking and going, I'm seeing things around digital leadership. I'm asking questions like, how do you build relationships with people you may never see in person?
Yes.
How do you communicate effectively when it's just over Zoom or these types of tools?
Yeah.
And so that's now really the interesting point, is asking those types of questions, because if we're thinking future of work and jobs, those are probably going to play a prominent role.
Yeah, definitely. The whole new normal, we don't know. And as leaders, it's changing just rapidly. And I definitely sense that for myself as well. And I had a funny situation the other day that we're planning a new project at work, and I'd had so many Zoom meetings with this man that he actually then came into the office, and he was just staring at me going, I haven't actually met, he was I'm thinking, he looks a bit strange the way he was looking at me. He goes, I haven't actually met you before. And then he wanted to shake my hands, which of course I jumped back in COVID land. But it was this strange thing of, I felt that I knew him so much, now if we're, last year we would have felt like I don't know you very well because I've only known you online or seen you, but I know people so much better personally. Whereas now it's just such normal business. You have to remind yourself when you actually are meeting them for the first time. And in some relationships, particularly on this podcast, I think my last 8 podcasts have been with women in America, and it's likely that I might never meet them, but you're still in their space and sharing their thing and in groups and chatting, and it's a whole new world.
I mean, you and I haven't met in person, right? Well, we've been chatting over Zoom, so
that's right.
It's exciting, but I think there's going to be a whole bunch of new skill sets that come out of it.
Yeah.
And it's just
I think one great thing is that you can, on this digital forum, you can meet people for different reasons. We met because you're writing a book and I've just had a book launched. And so it was that connection of it's actually a side aspect that then connected us digitally rather than, I would have probably not met you in our day-to-day life of what you were doing in your business and what I was doing in mine. So, and that's what I'm finding. There's just so many opportunities when people are sort of down and out about, the current circumstance, which is very challenging. There are also so many other opportunities to go, okay, well, what could I explore? And people are out and available now to be looking at opportunities to collaborate and to grow and share, for sure. Your passion for innovation.
Yeah.
So what does that look like on a day-to-day basis? How do you constantly feel that you are innovating in your mindset and opportunities for your service provision?
So for me, it's, I think innovation might be an outcome, but it's really just curiosity and a belief that many things are possible. So not all things are possible, but I really believe many things are possible. So with the curiosity, I am happy to go and try new stuff and have a go. And I find if you do that and you do that as a consistent practice, sometimes there's some cool things that come out of it. And definitely with business. So before COVID, we were really pretty much a face-to-face training company, and very quickly we had to go to 100% training, online training company.
Yeah.
And so learning everything from Zoom to online communication tools, which now might be considered innovative, but it's just us giving it a go and trying it out and making a small sense of bets and see which bets pay off.
Yes.
So, and that for me is a consistent thing that I like to do. It's a fun place to work. And the second thing around, again, that innovation question is just keeping a pulse on the zeitgeist. What are some of the trends? What's this generation coming through? What are their values? What are some of the ways that they're probably going to be acting? How do they communicate with people? So always asking those questions. I just think we probably need to be asking those questions a little more frequently now, because of things are changing at a bit of a pace.
Yes, rapidly. And I
Yeah.
think you've pointed on something, like even, you know, we're using Zoom, and I've noticed other companies, it's kind of like, well, don't just automatically use a product or a software
Mm-hmm.
that you have used before or whatever. Try them all, you know, see what actually
Mm-hmm.
works for you and your company and your consumers, your market, in everywhere, you know, even social. Don't just automatically start doing things. Try a whole lot of things. That
Yeah,
curiosity
you have to be
is
willing
so
to like
important.
fail. Just don't have catastrophic failures. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Manage your failures, learn from them, and then do better next time. But there's no way to
Yeah.
avoid it, you know?
Exactly. And that's how we learn in business. And I love that. And I often sort of, you know, I frame it around, it's almost like a game that you're playing, like, well, let's just see how this goes. We'll give it a go and see it. And we'll assess the impact on it, the return of investment, the time
Yeah.
that we had, our joy using the product and so forth. And then just go, sometimes we all look at each other and go, yeah, that was an epic fail. But you can have a laugh,
Yeah.
you know, and you go, okay, but why? And then
Yeah.
that actually helps you understand why you're choosing another product, you know, and moving on. And I think that's actually good too, having those learnings front of mind of why you didn't like something else often drives you to have real assurance and confidence in the product you're using, and also to realize, yeah, things could change. You know, you could think something's the best thing ever now, and then in 3 months suddenly find something else. And it's that willingness to always be going, I'm open to changing it again. And I think a lot of people struggle with that. They struggle with, oh, you know, it was such a big effort to get where I am now, and they get very protective, whereas you kind of go, well, you know, it might be your fall down, you know, if you actually stay there, because you can love it for a time, but it's not in the future. So how do you find the students, keeping up with the students coming through? You know, do you notice a big difference in the mindset of the, you know, the millennials and the Gen Zs now, the way they approach business and entrepreneurship?
Well, there's an interesting, so Deloitte does sort of a report looking at millennials and the generation after globally, and sort of needs, wants, aspirations, things like that. And so there is a distinction, some of the distinctions between millennials and the generation after that's coming through, but things like a social conscience, social impact is much more prominent, let's say, from, you know, even a decade ago. But also things like, you know, being entrepreneurial, how they spend their money, they're much more conscious consumers. So even if you're, let's say, in university and your product is to, you know, a degree, that's what you're selling essentially to the market, you can't assume the students are just going to buy that because they want that degree. They're much more informed. They want a job at the end of that. So they're going to be picking their degree, picking their institution based on that outcome. And as a university, just being aware of that. Same thing with business, you know, how they want business to do more. That's kind of what the insights or the research is saying. They want business to have a bit more positive impact. So before, if you were, you know, running a company, maybe you didn't care too much about the social impact or giving back to community. Whereas now the younger consumers will not spend $1 with you if you don't show that, you know.
Yes.
They're much more informed that way, and they back themselves in terms of how they spend that $1 based on the impact, the social impact that you're having, which I think is a positive. But also then we need to change our business practices, right? Because we know that's what the market's sort of asking us.
Absolutely. We definitely need to change our business practices, because that's right. Gone are the days where, you know, we went to university often at a place that was a good name for the university, not necessarily your course, or where your family wanted you to go, or where your friends from school went, or all these sorts of random decisions. Whereas you suddenly go a couple more generations down and they're sort of like going, well, that's right. If I spend my time and my money doing this specific course, then what are all the options of where I could do that course? And then when it finishes, what is the exact kind of area or growth opportunity, not just the end result, but then the career future and options, at least over the next decade, and an assumption that because they know that they'll probably grow and change in that time, it's not like I'll have a career for life in one area. And so it's such a different mindset. And therefore, you know, if you're the business, it's not automatic. People are not going to automatically choose you. If they're suddenly making all these big decisions before they get to you, they're very informed
Very
customer.
informed. Yeah.
Extremely informed customer.
Happy Googlers, yes.
Yes, yes, exactly. If you want some research, listeners, always ask a millennial or a 20-year-old. They'll know how to do that research for you and which apps help them out in that way. So what are you doing at Stanford at the moment? Tell me about that.
So it is an online course. It's something I took up just to, I guess, upskill myself on innovation and entrepreneurship. So courses on sort of design thinking, venture capital. And so from one point, it's from a work point of view, it's just to make sure that the training and content we deliver is relevant and it's what other people or other organizations are delivering and that we're on par with that. And then from a personal point of view, it is just to make sure I'm continually learning. So I'm finding, excuse me, there's something in my throat. I'm finding as I get older, there's a prominent or pressing need for me to learn. Like I really like learning and I'm liking it more and more, which makes it much more fruit salady, you know. But it's just
a lot more fun.
A lot more fun. And I think that's probably my biggest takeaway from coding wasn't that I learned how to, you know, code JavaScript. It kind of forced me to look at my own process of learning. And I particularly struggled in that course in the beginning because I took the same way I had learned law into learning coding.
So
different. I thought, oh, it's all problem solving. But actually it's very, very, very different. And I had to unlearn. It took me a few months before I actually understood what was happening in my brain. I had to unlearn how I learned law and then figure out the best way to learn coding. And I realize now there's two ways of looking at it. It's called applications first thinking and principles first thinking. Principles first thinking, which was around law, was you have to understand the fundamental, you know, the concepts, the theory. You don't go into a courtroom and go, now I'm just going to figure out how to do this.
It's exact.
And so I need to know all those nuances and details before I move on to the next step. In coding, which is applications first, was let's just go do. So every day we're learning something new and I'm like, but hold on, I haven't really figured out, you know, the thing we learned yesterday.
I don't have all the safety net. I don't have all the framework.
And I'm like, I don't know how it works or why. We haven't even looked at why. You're just telling me how the code works. And I really had to step away from that principles first that I didn't understand and just go with it. And I found by doing it, then the theory kind of, you know, plunked in somewhere in there. But that wasn't a pleasant finding at all. That was a very unpleasant journey. But that's something, you know, one thing we're all going to have to kind of do is figure out our own way of learning.
Yeah.
And sometimes unlearn everything we've been taught and figure out what that new way of learning is. That's, for me, that definitely wasn't an easy thing that came about.
Yeah, exactly. I think the whole future is, that's right, being able to do mental shifts to go, okay, well, it worked in that context, but the context has changed. Or the area that I'm working in changes. That's right. And if I'm constantly, you know, for you, if you're constantly risk averse and protective on the whole framework of things, but what if the framework doesn't apply to the new context that you're in and the flexibility and the growth that's just happening live? It's not on like a century of knowledge. And so it's if you've got to just have an open, flexible mindset and enjoy the journey, enjoy the learning,
and be okay about being humbled many times a day. Go to your knees and going, I really just don't know, you know, and ask for help. And next day, same thing, I don't know, you know, and understand that's okay to be in that position.
It's very okay. So what do you see as success? You're a successful woman, you know, you're a lawyer, you're an entrepreneur, you're CEO of a big company, you're giving back to the university, you're writing a book, you know, on paper, you're extremely successful. What does success mean to you though?
Always a very tough question. I think what resonates with me in terms of success, and this was, I read a post on Facebook from a Wharton Business School professor called Adam Grant. And when I read what he said, I'm like, okay, this is it. And it's the freedom to be able to sort of do what you want with your time. Because time for me is the most precious resource. And if I can have some sort of mastery or control on how I spend it, who I spend it with, what I do with my time, that really is a successful life. You know, everything else really is a bonus. So that's on a personal end. around community and family, just making sure very simply my family, my loved ones are happy. You know? And in a COVID world, just the fact that we're across 3 countries at the moment, so I can't actually go visit them. The fact that they're safe, that they have food to eat, they have, shelter, very, very simple needs, that they're all being met. Honestly, that's what helps me sleep at night.
Beautiful. You're a beautiful person. I've really enjoyed our conversation today. What final tip can you give our listeners? If you're a young woman in your early 20s and thinking, well, I think I did my first course and I'm not too sure if it's for me, or I don't know what's next, what advice would you give to them?
Well, I'll give it I'm reading a book, and it's by another lovely Annie Duke, and it's called Strategic Bets. And it's a book about decision making, and it's helped me. So I'll share it so it hopefully helps somebody else. And it's essentially says you treat life not so much as a chess game where there are a certain set of outcomes, predicted outcomes, but more like a poker game where life is just a bunch of uncertainties. You don't know what hands are about to be played, and there is a tremendous amount of luck. You can just join a poker game with someone who's been doing it for 20 years and win just because you got the right card, right? So she was saying, okay, look, treat it more like a poker game with a bunch of uncertainties, and understand that sometimes there'll be luck that comes in. You can make all the calculated decisions you want, and then luck comes in and either works in your favor or against your favor.
Yeah.
She says when you're trying to make decisions or go towards something, to have and make small strategic bets. So it's never going to be a complete failure, never going to be 0%, and it's never going to be maybe a complete success, 100%. But if I do this thing, put a percentage around it, around potential success, right? So I might go and do this coding course, and there's an 80% chance that I'll pass through. So then if I have a bit of a high percentage, okay, that should give me a little bit of confidence that I know that this is something I would do. And same thing other way. If I want to do something and there's a low level of confidence, 10%, 20%, what can I do to maybe make it a bit higher, or de-risk it a little bit in my mind, right? And then if I go and do it, if I still get a result, something happens and that result isn't what I wanted, don't automatically say that you made a bad decision. So if I tried coding and let's say for some reason I didn't make it through, me wanting to learn coding is a solid decision, even though I failed, let's say, right? I have to then go and learn from that decision and do something else. Maybe I need to get a tutor or something. And separate the decision from the result, because we always just conflate the two. So that's made a massive shift in my own thinking, gives me a lot of courage. So I'm able to make little bets everywhere, start a book here and do this, because I'm like, oh, I can do all this, and I'm thinking risk-wise. I'm approaching it, understanding there's risk, and trying to control and manage that risk. That helps me in terms of giving me peace of mind.
Okay, well, top tips there, ladies. I think that was really great advice. Just give things a go, spread your eggs. Start playing poker.
Spread your eggs,
spread your eggs. That's right. Spread those eggs around. Put them in a few different baskets. Try new things. Be bold. Take a little bit of risk. Start thinking a little bit more like a poker player, and not all the time, not in high risk games, but just a little bit. Start dabbling a bit, and back yourself. Back yourself to seize out opportunities. And that's right. And just because sometimes you're not lucky, and someone else did, doesn't mean that they're better. It could have just been that's the way the cards fell that time. And so, a real resilience is always required, isn't it? You've just got to keep bouncing back, and you just got to keep, do self-analysis, review, go back to the decision. Why did you make that decision? And what have been the actions? And could you make some different changes if that decision didn't give you the result you wanted? There's often many paths, and there's also many people who are out there available to help. So,
absolutely.
Don't be shy. We all ask for help, particularly when we're learning new things. So it's all part of the journey. So, well, thank you so much for coming on the program today. It's been an absolutely delightful, interesting conversation.
Thanks, Annie. Thank you so much for having me. Best of luck with everything.
Thank you.